Good morning and welcome to another one of the WealthTech Talks from the Wealth Mosaic. My name is Stephen Wall, co-founder and head of marketplace and content at the Wealth Mosaic. Today we are going to be talking with three technology industry experts in the wealth management arena about the topic of an extremely important topic for the future of the industry in terms of its relationship with clients, and that is about client discovery and acquisition with the use of technology. So I'm joined today by three guests. I'm joined by Alessandro Tonchia from Finantics, Pugh Stuckey from ETOPS, and Anthony Bream from Wealth Dynamics. I will quickly ask each of them to introduce themselves quickly, who they are, what they do, and a little bit of their highlighted perspective on this topic, and then we will go into the details. So, Alessandro, if I quickly turn to you for a 30-second introduction.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Alessandro Tonchia. I'm based in London, and I'm one of the founders of Finantics. I'm currently in charge of strategy for our product, and what we are focusing on is the sales and client acquisition and advisory support for wealth managers. So we cover most of the front office activities with a big focus of helping wealth managers sell more.
Great, Alessandro, thank you. Pugh, over to you for a quick introduction.
Thank you, Stephen. Happy to be part of this panel discussion. My name is Pugh Stuckey. I'm the CEO and founder of ETOPS. I'm working out of Switzerland. ETOPS is a company with around 50 employees. We are focused on technology and service. So usually what we see is that technology can solve a lot of things in our industry. But nevertheless, we have also a large service team that supports our clients in those processes.
Great, thank you. And Anthony, to you for your introduction, please.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Anthony Bream. I'm the Managing Director for Wealth Dynamics, covering the EMEA and Americas region. Wealth Dynamics, we're an 8-year-old company. We specialize in client lifecycle management solutions for specifically the wealth management sector. So we're working globally across many different types of firms, so ranging from tier 1 banks through to more mid-tier niche players across the world. And we spend about 48,000, 50,000 man days now developing specifically our platform for the wealth management sector.
Great, thank you all. So we now start the discussion with hopefully a good structure. So for the audience, we're going to give it a quick introduction and then go into some of the opportunities, the challenges, some of the tools and technologies, maybe some of the things that wealth managers can't do but should be doing in this area, and then looking at maybe where this kind of technology and focus can take them. From my perspective, in building the Wealth Mosaic and being having a view across a lot of the industry, this is one area that kind of stood out as an opportunity or something we didn't really hear too much about in terms of technology and tools. Hopefully the guys here today can set me straight on that and tell me that there's a lot happening and a lot that can be done for the benefit of the industry. Obviously, the client is the lifeblood. So, Alessandro, what can you tell us at a headline level about client acquisition and client discovery using technology for wealth managers? How can you set the scene there of what is happening and what is going on?
I think maybe just in terms of terminology, there is 3 main dimensions. One is what we call client and prospect intelligence, how to discover new leads, how to understand more who they are, how wealthy they are, how risky they are. The second area, maybe the more classic CRM support for pipeline management. That's really planning your client acquisition activities and monitoring if you're on track. So it's both a tool for the advisor and for management to understand how you're progressing. And the third one, more important probably in the current environment, is the whole collaboration area. The process of acquiring a new client is a lengthy process and requires you to display all the digital abilities that you have as a firm. So you need to interact, to have meetings, to have chats, to share materials, to have the prospect fill in application forms. So this whole collaboration world is much more important now that, more likely than not, you won't be able to meet a client face to face.
Those 3 areas. Pugh, what is your introduction to this topic?
So I think, over the last few years, also on our side, and ETOPS is now in the 10th years of existing. We have been very much focused on client support, existing clients. We have done a lot for them. We built mobile apps, how you interact with them, but only I would say the last very few years, the whole industry moves also into the area of, okay, how can I get new clients, new leads? How do I manage that process? And something that we are very specifically working a lot on it and spend a lot of resources is actually, how can you get new leads out of your existing leads? I think that's something, if you would buy something, usually in your private life, you would always ask your friends. And if your friend tells you that's a good thing, then very likely that they buy this. But in the institutional world and also in the banking world, that part has never really been done. I just read the study from the Big Four. They say it's only done, advisors only ask 15% of their clients if they have leads for them. But that's natural because, you not just call the client and tell me, hey, do you have some leads for me? So we have been working very hard on the whole lead generation tools and analytics. So that's something that just has evolved over the last few years very much. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So Anthony, so we've got the sort of three pillars perhaps from Finantics and the lead intelligence from ETOPS. What is your Wealth Dynamics perspective on an introduction to this topic?
Sure. Well, we've always viewed client lifecycle management as being a continual cycle, and that always starts at the sales prospecting. So how do we help use technology to drive more prospect conversion? How do we make sure that we're investing the right level of money in the right areas for our marketing campaigns? How do we manage propensity across the people that we are talking to so we can really fine-tune our messaging and our approach to make sure that we're getting the right people through the sales funnel? Then we move on to onboarding, and the really critical part of onboarding is to try and make that not too intrusive for the customer. It's probably the most important customer experience part of the journey. But if you make it too difficult, too intrusive, you're giving people a lot of information to share, and they've got to give you personal information back. So how do you do that seamlessly, quickly, but compliantly, both for the advisor and for the client? And then thirdly, the ongoing client service management. And so how do you keep that whole process from prospecting to onboarding to ongoing client management seamless, automated, intelligent, but also from the customer perspective, how do you start to build that emotional connection? And the evidence is out there that there's a 260 trillion opportunity now that the wealth management sector is chasing, but it's going to be very hard to find that slice of that 260 trillion unless you really focus, I think, in 4 key areas. And I'm reflecting on a recent Orbium and Accenture C-level wealth report that's just been published. And they've defined the 4 key areas for the next 5 years for wealth management. First is differentiated client experience. How do we really give that client experience, differentiate, make ourselves stand out from the crowd? Number 2 is the intelligent operations and technology. So how do we actually do more with less? How do we actually start to make processes work more efficiently? How do we drive cost out of the business, but how do we drive improvements as well? The third is empowered talent. So how do we give our advisors, our relationship managers, our support teams the empowerment that they need to do their job, to allow them to make those emotional connections to their clients, to provide quality service? And the fourth and final one was the change of the business and the operating models. And I think we can see over the next 4 or 5 years a significant change, mainly driven by technology, because only technology can replace the cost cutting and the headcount reductions we're going to see across the industry in the next 4 or 5 years. So get it right and you can drive revenue growth by up to 30%, and you can reduce costs by up to 25%. Get it wrong, and wealth managers expect to lose on average about a third of their clients' wealth at the point of succession. That's around about $40 trillion over the next 10 or so years. So quite a big challenge to go and actually aim for. But get it right, you can do really well. Get it wrong, then you can find that you're suffering.
Yeah, some good figures there. Well, scary figures, big figures. Alessandro, what about coming on? Anthony's touched on some of the drivers that make this a really important area. In some senses, it's obvious you need to win clients, you need to discover clients. There's an aging client base in this industry. what else would you say are drivers that make this a really important area for wealth managers to focus on?
Well, obviously, I think the core of key to success of every wealth manager is getting more clients, more access under management, more share of wallet. So in a way, it's probably the top priority for any firm that wants to grow. What we see also in times of crisis, where the performance of portfolios might not be as great as usual, clients tend to be more volatile on their behavior. Probably you will not leave your wealth manager if you're getting a 10% return every year, whereas maybe in complex market condition like now, where people might be losing money, they're more likely to dump whoever accompanied them on the journey and go somewhere else. So there's more clients up for grabs, not only the big pie that Anthony was referring to, but tactically there's more volatility in the market, that people that are focused can go and get more clients, especially people that can prove that they can serve client digitally in the current condition. Advisor that did well face to face might not be equally successful in a remote support mode. But more generally, I think the topic of sales effectiveness is key, and it is about supporting the advisor, but it's also understanding which clients it's worth spending effort on. There's a client that might look very wealthy, you'd invest a lot of energy, and maybe the assets are not even worth the effort. There's a client that might look very respectable, but if you do a rigorous KYC early in the cycle, you might discover that client has risk exposures that don't make it worth fighting for their business, because compliance might block you anyway down the path. So again, this idea of prospect intelligence really drives what your sales priorities are, and recognizing which client it's worth investing effort in is a key success factor.
Great, thank you. Hugh, what is your view? I mean, I don't know whether it's a Swiss perspective only or whether you have a broader view, but are there certain drivers that, in addition to what Anthony and Alessandra have mentioned, that you would highlight?
Yeah, so you just mentioned the Swiss view. So, I think our business or industry is very much driven by, the personal interaction, and people know their relationship manager. And even up to now, you see that still that's the business model that works the best. There has been also a lot of different robo-advisors entering Switzerland, and after a while, they went back and said that there's not the market for that. And that's just because, like the one-to-one relationship is still, just dominates the market, right? The stickiness of clients is still very high, I would say. Nevertheless, I think it's just starts now that, people would look around also other opportunities and other advisors they maybe could join. But in generally, I think it just started now here that people would look into more digital solutions, how they serve their clients. Up to now, and that's just from the history of what Switzerland stands for in the past 20 years, was like one-to-one relationships. People had their money in Switzerland, for obvious reasons, etc. And that that got away a bit, and now it's more a question of how can you serve a client, what's the value a client gets, which hasn't been very much a part of it the previous decade, So on our side, so one thing, that's why I say, we're very much focused on, surfing existing clients, making sure they get digital experience. But now more and more the trend is coming to, they need to find new clients, margins also going down. So growth is a question for all of them, right? And so generating new leads, and like Alex said, having the sales process more efficient, that's of course a topic for all of them.
Great. So, Anthony, I mean, you touched on the Orbium Accenture report that was put out by Ian and the team last week. Any other drivers that you would point to that haven't been picked up from the discussion so far? And beyond that, we've sort of touched on the status. So Pew just mentioned how personal relationship driven this market has been. There's probably cultural issues. There's the role of the relationship manager. There's all these, as Alex touched on, digital tools coming into play now, which is obviously in your world, in all three of your worlds. And what would you say about where this market is in terms of its status? So further drivers, and where's the status now, or what's the status now?
Yeah, good question. I think the biggest driver is really the cost income ratio. I mean, that's what everyone's looking at. There's going to be a significant cost focus coming out of this COVID crisis, which are probably for most organisations unprecedented in terms of scale, what it means. But everyone says, don't ruin a good crisis. So let's use this as an opportunity to step back. Maybe the wealth management sector has not been embracing of technology as much as retail has. So surely now is the time to look at the products that the three firms on this bill represent and others. And there's so much technology out there that can really help drive out that waste, find the efficiency gains across the processes, across the way that organizations work. And I guess fundamentally what we're looking at here is, how do I offer my customer or my customers personalized service at scale? And what's going to really drive that is looking more carefully at client segmentation. So yes, how do I get better return on my marketing investments? How do I know which campaigns are working most successfully? How do I make sure that I'm putting the right money into the right areas to provide my clients with the right information and to get them to really come on board? And it's all about building this emotional connection between the advisor and the client. And another survey that I always point to is it's no longer good enough to have a satisfied client. You've got to have an emotionally connected client. And if you get an emotionally connected client, you're going to represent that with a third less churn from your business of customers. You can opportunity-wise get up to 6 times the AUM growth, and you can also see double the amount of recommendations coming into your business. So how do you drive that personalization service at scale, but also then drive emotional connection with your clients? And that's the real challenge that I think the wealth management sector is facing over the next few years. And the data is there. There's a paradox of data. There's plenty of data out there now that can be analysed and reviewed, and insights from that data can be certainly found. So I think there's going to be more focus on the data and using that data more wisely, and getting insights and reacting to that data more quickly. So for me, it's really getting better visibility, providing that personalised service at scale, looking at your client segmentation more carefully, but also really saying, how do we emotionally connect our advisors to our customers? And face-to-face will come back, but maybe not as much as it ever has been. So how do I do that remotely? How do I do that across a massive demographic of clients with different requirements, digital, face-to-face, paper, app, or sitting in an office shaking your hand?
Great. So a lot going on. Alessandro, you touched earlier on, I think, on the digital collaboration hub, so this ecosystem to service clients. When you look at the status of the market in terms of how it uses technology in engaging and acquiring clients, where is it? What's your overarching view? Is it at the beginning? Is it in the middle? Does it have a long way to go?
Yeah, I think we have a good grip on that because we operate globally and we see clients in different geographies. If I were to sum it up, we see some progress in the CRM pipeline management area. Maybe 30-40% of the wealth managers do have a quite effective CRM system. The whole collaboration space, it's now been propelled by the crisis. So a lot of people are putting some collaboration infrastructure, chat, secure calls, document sharing, screen sharing in place. So maybe there's a 5-10% that has initiatives there. Where we see very little effort spent is using technology like artificial intelligence to mine new leads, so to discover new liquidity events, interesting clients, navigate the relationship structure of the existing clients to find out people that might qualify as potential leads and getting that personal introduction. So using a bit more innovative data mining technology is something where the industry, there's a couple of innovators out there, but it seems almost a low-hanging fruit that the industry didn't focus enough on.
Yeah. Pew, I don't know whether your perspective would just be Switzerland or whether it's broader than that. So please feel free to go broad as you like. What do you think the status is locally for you in Switzerland? You mentioned it being such a personal, relationship-driven market. are they using technology to engage and acquire new clients, to do lead generation, to understand relationships, like you touched on earlier, or is it really?
No, I think yeah, thank you. So I think Alex is right. So the CRM system part, almost everybody has a system, does takes care of their leads, etc. But something that is not taken up at all is like Alex also mentioned, is the whole lead generation. How do I get new clients? How do I find them? How do I navigate through networks? How can technology really help me? And we can talk about AI or not, or machine learning or not, but at the end, how we manage those mass of information in the lead generation process, in the sales process. And I think the industry is, honestly, it's nowhere, right? So we are at the start, and mostly, as I said earlier, it's the focus was on taking care of these existing clients. We do quite a lot there. We do personalized reporting for clients. So every client gets his personalized reporting, but that's still focused on existing client base, right? There's a lot of things going on, right? You see a lot. Also, the whole collaboration. There's companies out there that just focus on that. So a lot is going on there. Just the lead generation and navigating through the networks that hasn't been touched very, very much in the past. And honestly, also for the Swiss market, that wasn't really necessary. Clients were there; they were coming for whatever reasons, but that wasn't necessary. And I really think the world has changed there a bit. Now the focus needs to be on how do I get new clients out, maybe also out of my existing clients. And then at the end, you also have to say the whole technology stack of the industry is also just at the start.
Yep.
I always say we focus on digitalization, visualization, and sometimes that sounds funny. People would say, we do that since 10 years or so. But if you look at the state of the industry and you walk into different institutions, it's always like, they're still working like I would have worked 15 years ago, which is just a fact, right? Next to me, I have my iPhone, who does basically everything of my life, right? But the way we work also institutionally, it's just very, very, didn't really much happen in the past. Yeah.
Okay. Anthony, you just touched on, there's a lot of work going on with existing clients, and obviously there's an opportunity, as you mentioned, to build deeper relationships with existing clients and win more wallet share, gain more AUM, do more business, make more profit. What about winning new clients? So are you seeing much in terms of technology to actually discover and engage clients who aren't yet within wealth management or aren't yet within your particular wealth management business?
Yeah, well, I think, CRM for me has really been very underutilized and very understood, I think, across the wealth management industry. And really CRM for most businesses, whether it's retail or travel or any organization, it's the hub of how you manage and look at your prospects and deal with them. But I think the regulator really sort of forced CRM onto the wealth management sector. And so when someone tells you to do something for their own reason, you kind of design it around that reason. So CRM, I don't think, has really been utilized in wealth management effectively. And that's why we built the Wealth Dynamics platform, to sit on top of that CRM, very much tightly integrated into it, but to actually bring the data out of the CRM, but present the forms, the fields, the orchestration that the advisor, the relationship manager, the salesperson needs to use to effectively look at how they can enhance the data in the CRM. So, CLM for me, client lifecycle management, is a great way of enhancing the data, analyzing that data, but also providing that orchestration layer across the various systems that also feed into that cockpit view. And you look at tools like LinkedIn now. LinkedIn is now part of Dynamics 365. We tightly integrate into Dynamics 365. So our clients can now start to do more sales prospecting, looking via their CRM into the LinkedIn environment. And they can start to now look at relationships. They can start to now look at connections. We're also doing work for a number of clients right now, looking at this intelligent KYC, or intelligent sales prospecting. And we're doing that in a number of different ways. So for one client, for example, we're working with a link into Charities Commission and Companies House. So we can start to help them get more information about their prospects, so they don't need to keep asking the same questions. And I think one of the mistakes that the wealth management sector has been making recently is that they're asking their customers for the same data at different parts in the client life cycle. So really the mantra should be, get the data once and use it many times across the process, but don't keep asking your client for the same data time and time again. So how do we start to reach out to organizations that have publicly available information there that we can start to use to build up that picture of that potential prospects or clients, so we don't need to be too intrusive in the questions and the information that we need from them. So I think why we're seeing that going, Stephen, is more of a kind of a hybrid phygital approach. So allowing the advisor and the client to both provide the information and ask for the information that's needed, but kind of like in a joint partnership approach, rather than kind of a give me what I'm asking you for, then we'll put it into a filing cabinet somewhere, and we'll probably ask you for the same information again in 3 weeks' time. And I think clients find that very annoying, inefficient. It's personal information, it's intrusive. So there has to be a real focus on how do we, again, provide that personalized service at scale. How do we do more with less? Because there will be less support teams, there'll be less people to support those sort of operational journeys. And the technology has to come in there to help orchestrate that, advise, and triage what's important and when it's important and when it's needed. So really giving the advisors the right tools that they need to give that better quality of service. That's the real key for me.
Yeah, and a more of an integrated view.
And more of an integrated view. And also use the data, right? Because there's so much data available now. And, I often hear clients say to me, we have so much data, we find it very difficult to get the signals from the noise. So we look at these data sets and we can't quite see what we're looking for. But, we embrace a lot of different technologies in our platform. We heavily integrate into Power BI, and Power BI is such a powerful suite of tools now that allow you to get these insights. But again, that uses machine learning in the background to also give you suggestions. And one way that you personalize your service to your client is that you know more about the client than they know about themselves, through a combination of aggregated data from different sources, through the use of very clever technology. And you give your advisors the next best suggestion. So they can proactively say to their clients, we've got a product here that we've just seen that fits your portfolio and your risk profile and your time to invest profile very, very tightly. We'd like to spend some time just telling you more about this product. Would you like to invest money into this product? So giving the advisors, the relationship managers, the tools that they need and the data that they need to give that next best suggestion quickly and accurately is possible now. We've got clients doing it today with our software and partner tech that we embrace to allow that sort of element of next best suggestion. So again, that's helping me build that personal, emotional connection with my client, that trust and confidence, because I'm not reacting to them asking me what's going on with their money. I'm saying, this is how I can make you more money. And also look at the sentiment of that client. We have products now where we're monitoring client sentiment. Is your client sentiment degrading, improving, or is it neutral? What are you doing to help improve that client sentiment? Why is it going down, not going up? So again, the data has all the clues. It's just really surfacing that data in context to the right person at the right time to allow them to then start to act upon that data proactively and build that emotional connection.
Great, thank you, Anthony. Alessandro, earlier you touched on, I think, the sales intelligence, improving that process. I think Anthony mentioned things like LinkedIn, Companies House, the Charities Commission as data sources, wealth managers, extreme depth of data, but they're not using it very well. What sort of things are you doing, or what steps can firms take to increase their understanding of new client opportunities? LinkedIn is an interesting one, which I think is actually not used very much as far as I'm aware yet, but it will come. Are there other sources that wealth managers can really target, other tools that they can use to really generate new leads?
Yeah, there's quite a lot, and maybe let's distinguish the lead discovery, where we think that you can do a lot by scanning news. You can have news about someone being the owner of a fast-growing company, some companies being rumored to be sold soon, someone inheriting, someone getting rave reviews about show they have. So there's lots of indicators of emerging wealth that you can tackle to find the name of an interesting lead. Once you have that name, you can aggregate lots of information. Company house and Dun & Bradstreet would be examples. LinkedIn is another one. News, risk databases that might indicate if a person is politically exposed or have some shady associations. Again, looking at flow of dividends, some companies being successful. So there's lots of signals that you can pick up, both on the opportunity side, but I always emphasize also on the risk side. Somebody might be very wealthy and very attractive, but might have unsavory connection to people that are not that interesting. The last one, I think Pius has been emphasizing that. Looking at all even connection can be discovered. You can find out who is on the same board, who is on the same charity as other people. If any of those members of those networks is a happy client of yours, you have the channel for a warm introduction into those leads which are relevant to you. So we have tools that can really pull together all of those strings of data into a holistic picture of your prospect that allows you first to evaluate opportunity and risk, and then to better prepare the pitch and the entry point into the prospect through your network of connections.
Just a quick follow-up question on that. We've talked about the role of the relationship here, and obviously there's relationship managers, private bankers who theoretically should be incentivized to use this intelligence, but they're perhaps sometimes stuck to a traditional model. They like to meet people and develop knowledge and relationships over a period of time. I mean, are they using this content and this contextualized information well yet? Or
our client that deployed that successfully really tried to have a cultural change by saying, yes, traditionally you, a relationship manager, you own the client intelligence, you knew everything about the client. In headquarters, we only saw the result of your activities. Now, by saying, we can give you net new leads, we can give you better intelligence to act upon, they almost give him a carrot and they tie them better into a corporate flow rather than just a personal relationship of the advisor, which means the advisor is more motivated to use those tools, because then they will not have any surprises from compliance, because we will pre-vet that specific prospect from a risk perspective. But the benefit for the corporation is that all that knowledge is now resides with the firm rather than being in the head of the pockets of the relationship manager. So if you define it correctly from an organizational point of view, you will see a motivated salesperson, and you'll have lots of institutional knowledge and control over client at the central level.
Pew, and what about in Switzerland? What are the things maybe that you're doing for clients that helping them move in this direction to work better on sort of digital tools and technology to enable lead generation? I mean, is it a cultural issue that you're facing in terms of winning that battle? Or is it a technological issue? You touched on the technology stack earlier and the legacy technology stack.
Yeah, if we pick up that point, I think for sure integration of technology into the existing landscape of those institutions, that's for sure a challenge, right? So usually there's a lot of very good companies, technology companies out there, very good solutions out there. But I think one of the biggest problems is still the integration into their architecture, what they're running today, right? And there, I have to say, but we see also more openness to actually break up their existing frameworks and are open to kind of allow for other models, right? Because if we would try just to integrate the new technology frameworks into their existing infrastructure, that would be a very long and very, very tough road to go. So usually it works better for institutions that are also open to break up a bit their models and allow other technology solutions beside maybe their main and core systems, etc. Then, like what Alessandro said, I think on our side, we focus very much on, we put a lot emphasis on an existing clients and try to generate leads out of that client. with tapping into the network. And like Alessandro said, there's a lot of data around. You can find out who is in the board. We know how long he has been in the board. So we try, we call it the distance model. We try to find out how close two people are. And for that, you can use a lot of public available data. And then on the whole news side, if somebody sells a company or there's some wealth generated that you see through the news, it's rather something we use on the client relationship and less on the lead generation. Because my focus is, I'm very close to existing clients and they're very close to their friends and networks. So it's for us easier way to tap into new networks and new clients. And I think for now, we try that our clients focus on that kind of piece of the business, which has been, I personally feel, untapped for the last few years.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Guys, great. That's Anthony. There's a lot going on here, right? There's some great technology, amazing sources. It's increasingly integrated. It's very powerful. So we're moving from sort of paper-based intelligence to something that's much more contextual and, let's say, technology-enabled. So where does this sit in the wealth space? There are lots of different types of wealth managers, big and small, IFAs, private banks, family offices, investment managers. Who can use this technology now? Who's best placed to work with it and benefit from it? And therefore are some excluded from that marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do across our clients, and we're working with tier 1 global banks all the way through to mid-tier regional. I mean, we are seeing some set patterns here. So everyone's got a back office, everyone's got some level of CRM, everyone's got a financial planning tool, everyone's got a portfolio management system, everyone's doing some marketing automation. And so really, I think the key trend that we're seeing here is the wealth management sector, I think, has been a little bit guilty where IT have had the power to make the decision on which tools are used, and often that then drives how the business process works. And we're now starting to see, I think, the business turning that around a bit, saying, well, the business processes that are being dictated to us aren't working well. They're breaking, they're inefficient, they're expensive. And, the way that we're moving forward now is we need to become efficient, streamlined. We've got to focus on our CIR, our cost income ratio. We've got to focus on personalization at scale. So there's a lot of time being spent now looking at digitization of processes, but also that's a good way of looking at how do we improve the customer experience. The advisor experience also has to be considered. It's not just about the customer, it's also the advisor and the people on the other side of the phone or the secure web chat or the meeting room. But also, how do we bring all these various systems together that sit in isolation or don't talk very well together? So this is where you need this orchestration layer. You need this orchestration layer that sits on top of all of these various systems. There's kind of the conductor of the orchestra. And it's kind of saying, this is what information I need from this system now, and this is why I need this information. And this is what I'm going to do with this information, and this is the analysis that I can get from this information. So our client lifecycle management solution, for example, has that orchestration layer where it's joining up sales to onboarding all the way through to service management. And you can't treat those parts of the business in isolation because there's a trend, there's a pattern, there's a relationship being built there from the start to the middle to the end of that client. So when you're going to remediate that client, you've got to reprove to the regulator that they haven't changed their circumstances, they're still suitable as a client. You're still treating that client in a way that you're asking them lots of information. It's intrusive, it's personal, it's time consuming, and quite frankly, it's annoying for the client, but they have to do it. So how do I keep that whole client lifecycle experience being of value? How do I generate value rather than discomfort or annoyance? How do I get that emotional connection throughout every single stage of the life cycle? And you only really do that by getting an aggregated view of your client. And that's driven by all of those various data points, from the planning to the ongoing account opening, all the way through to the next best suggestion. So really there's a common theme here, which is how do I look at my people, my processes, my technology, and how do I drive that end-to-end view? How do I drive that continual build-up or picture of my client's sentiment? And then how do I react to that client sentiment going down? And what do I learn from my clients whose sentiment is increasing? What have we done to them or for them that's enabled them to show positive increase in sentiment or net promoter score versus a degradation? So you really need to have in the wealth management sector a chief data officer, and he or she needs to be looking very carefully at all of the data that's coming out of these various systems. But also the advisors and the RMs who are dealing with the client's day-to-day need access to that aggregated data in context of their role and in context of their clients. They can really offer that client value and insights and things that they've never thought about to really generate that emotional connection. And the numbers speak for themselves that I've mentioned before. You get that bit right, then you can take a bigger slice of the pie.
Alessandra, I know previously you mentioned a particular client who'd worked with you on a particular solution. Anthony mentions working in tier 1 and down to mid-tier regional firms. From your perspective, where does this kind of technology sit right now? I mean, is it just for the big firms or the bigger firms, or is it more broadly available for smaller wealth managers, boutiques, external asset managers, and so on?
I think that the technology per se is quite mature, and as such can be easily deployed into many contexts, even companies that don't have a strong IT team, or I think now, especially with a cloud implementation, you can lower the cost and the effort and the expertise needed to deploy such solutions. Our experience is a bit more in the tier 1, tier 2, and we think there is a bit more, if you want, proportional benefits to be gained, because those companies tend to be very fragmented in how they manage client. Compliance does their bit, onboarding does their bit, the advisor does their part, they have a supervisor. So there's much more coordination work to do. There's much more tightening the information footprint about the client so that everybody can play off the same sheet. So we think that, in a way, in the head of an individual advisor, lots of that information flows converge into his personal view, but getting a collaborative approach to a prospect, to a client, coordinate the workflows is much more important the more complex and geographically distributed the organization is. Also in wealth management, you often have multiple people on the client side. You have a household, you have their advisors, their lawyer. So there's also, as you're looking at collaboration, it's multiple parties on the financial institution side and multiple parties on the client side that you need to coordinate as frictionally as possible. And again, in today's environment, as digitally as possible. And cracking that part, I think, will really release big benefits in terms of sales effectiveness and general productivity of the sales, advisory, and client servicing team for those firms.
Great answer. In Switzerland, obviously, it's a very fragmented market. There are many, many small firms, independent asset managers, family offices. In terms of what you've talked about earlier with lead generation and winning business through existing networks, is that attributable across the whole markets, from the big global private banks down to the smallest players? Or from a technology perspective, do you really need to have a certain capacity internally to manage that process?
Yeah, no, I think it's clear. It's just for the bigger clients, right? It's the private banks, the large multifamily offices. But in Switzerland we have everybody talks about 3,000 external asset managers. I don't even know if that's true, but it's for those just the larger ones. Then you have maybe 0 to 200 larger institutions. Larger wealth managers, those guys, they can first run a project like that on the resources side. Everybody else, that's just how things are today. I think just the whole industry is not ready, so we can deploy it efficiently also for those managers, right? I think most of them, they're still focused on how to interact with their clients digitally. Yep. And less about what is the next technology solution around to kind of find new leads and manage that pipeline. Yeah. Most of them are still, do I need the CRM, right? So So that's a bit where we are, right? But of course, the larger ones, that's a topic for them. They also invest a lot of money in that, and they have the ability with resources and money to actually run a project like that, and have the power to kind of implement it throughout their sales teams.
Okay. Well, I'm just looking. We have several questions, Anthony. So, do you mind if I just turn over to some questions? I'm not sure if you can see them, but I'll read them out to you. So, this is a good one, I think, to start off with, Anthony. So, with the great wealth transfer looming on the horizon, what should wealth managers be doing to build relationships with the next generation? So, obviously, that's, we all know that the numbers are not always good in terms of the loss to wealth managers when money moves from one generation to the next. People talk about big percentage shifts and losses in assets under management. So what can they do, and what can technology do to support building relationships with the next generation?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, I was just reading this morning in the Financial Times the big statement that Amazon, Alibaba, and other tech giants will enter the wealth management sector. So if you think what's happened over the past few months, the amount of data that those sorts of firms have collected from probably a higher wealth bracket who have been forced to shop online because everyone's been, unable to go to their shops until recently. So these are the big sleeping giants, right? These are the guys that are sitting in the shadows collecting all this data about the cross demographic from the retired, colonel in Surrey through to the digital entrepreneur who's just sold her business and made lots of money. So the big threat right now, really, for the traditional wealth management sector, big and small, is the big teams, the big tech giants coming in. Now they've got cloud deployed software, they've got data which is being analysed in minute fragments every single second of every single day, and to me that is a massive threat for what's a traditionally slow-moving environment for embracing innovation and technology. And so, when you're immediately looking at your processes saying, how do I drive out cost? You're distracted by the fact that, we've seen with Goldman Sachs and Marcus a slow step into the market. So that's definitely a big threat for people out there right now. And I think what we'll see over the next 5 years or so is technology will start to get regulated as more and more technology becomes available. And there is this sort of concept of what they call explainability. Particularly for artificial intelligence. So AI is very powerful when it works well, but it's also very risky when it doesn't work well. GDPR now also starts to consider explainability of AI. So if I'm turning you down for an investment because I feel that you're too risky, because the AI engine is saying that, how do I explain that to the client? How does the client know what that decision's been made on? Because that's a big negative impact on that client. I've been told that I can't do something because of a machine learning algorithm making a decision. So there's a real dichotomy of movement going to happen in the next 5 years. So more tech vendors coming in threatening the space, more reliance on AI, machine learning, but also then having to explain the decision making behind the algorithm driven by the regulator. And so how do you start to then manage that, as well as look at your customer processes? How do you make your advisors more empowered if they're going to be restricted more because they've got to prove the decision making that they made based on a machine learning algorithm that might actually have an error in the code? And if that has an error in the code, suddenly you're hit with a big fine and reputational impact. So I think generally, it's looking at the data that you've got now and making the decisions on the data that you've got now, and emotionally connecting to those clients with the data that you have about those clients, but empowering your advisors to be able to make the decisions on the back of that data, because they've got the ability to then make next best suggestions on the person that they're dealing with. And they don't need to know the age or the religion or the culture or anything about that individual. They just need to know the name. But the information they're given should be sufficiently tailored and personalized to give that emotional connection to allow you to keep that client on your books. Otherwise, they'll roll off to Amazon or they'll roll off to somebody else. And that's the real challenge here. Getting that mix is going to be quite difficult over the next 5 or so years.
Great. Alessandra, what do you think about how these tools and systems can support wealth managers engaging the next generation, and in this shift of wealth from one generation to the next? How can they maintain or ensure that they're involved in that process?
Well, it is a bit the holy grail of the industry, and it's a quite complex equation. I think it's a mix. There's also a cultural element. So a lot of our clients do education for the next generation. They involve them into training programs. They have a lot of early relationship building. As technology providers, I think our main contribution is to show that we have a lot of digital support. The appetite of those generation is less for the maybe drinking and dining with the relationship manager, is really seeing that there is immediate access, there is convenient multi-channel accessibility to data, there is interactive chat and simulators. So I think putting that level of coolness that some of the, for example, of the fintech startups have been addressing a lot, taking that and putting that into corporate process of wealth management, so that even the most technophile young generation members can find added value according to their cognitive style. I think that's a very important element.
You mentioned obviously trying to win business in Switzerland from the existing client base. Obviously, wealth transfer is happening across the world and will be applicable to institutions in Switzerland too. Are they doing anything from a technology perspective to engage the next generation to ensure that those assets either remain or that they can compete if they do leave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I fully agree with Alessandra on the digital support side. So there's a lot been done that you have this infrastructure of digital support also for that generation. So I see sometimes clients. On one hand they want the mobile app, and on the other side you see the guy who wants still a paper report, which if you can print it a bit bigger because he cannot read that good anymore, right? So, but nevertheless, it's just output channels that you still have. On one side, the 20-year-old, that the first question is, where's the app? And the other one is, can you print it, the whole report a bit bigger so I can also read it, right? So, but I think, it's the digital support side that more and more you start to think about how you can support that generation, right? And then, but at the end, it's always, we also talked about client segments, what is the segment you are in, right? So I still see the one-to-one relationship, as soon as your assets with an advisor is, I don't know, somewhere north of 1 million, it's still the one-to-one relationship that you want. I don't see much where people would say, just give it, even if it will be Amazon or Alibaba, But anything below that, so between 0 and 100K, I would probably also give it to Amazon or Alibaba if I just get this great experience on the digital side. But at the end, people still want also kind of a story. They want to know what you think about, what do you think about the market, what do you think about China, about this and that. Where is my money invested, What does my money actually do if I invest money? That's things that you see more and more also when it comes to the global movement of back to a more how should I say a way to treat our earth, right? So and you see people are getting more and more involved. Where actually is my money invested, right? What does my money do if I invest money? So that's the part of, okay, I want also some information. I want the story. I want to know what's going behind the scenes, and I just don't put my money on a bank account and then that's it, right? And for that, digital support is a very big thing. And then at the end, usually what I see, people want somebody they can talk to. And if it's not just talking about the money, it's they want to talk about other things, and maybe they have financing problems or anything. You want somebody that supports you.
Great. Well, gentlemen, we are, I think, 5 minutes from the hour, so we should probably sum up. To do that, actually, there's one further question that's coming in, which I think will allow you the opportunity to sum up this topic, which, from my perspective, the things that go into this are broader than I perhaps realized. And we should probably write something up to follow up from this piece. But if I start with you, Anthony, the question is this, from one of the audience: what are the new ways or channels for wealth managers to acquire new clients? And I think that's quite a nice question to allow you also to sum up your kind of headline action points on this topic. So what are the new ways or channels to win clients? And then, what are the 1 or 2, 3 things that wealth managers should do to improve in this area?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've heard the word intelligent a lot on this call today, and everyone, a lot of my clients talk about how do I do intelligent sales prospecting? How do I do intelligent KYC? And the definition of intelligence is the ability to vary state or action or response to varying situations. So in order to do that, you've got to have the flexibility of your process or processors. You can't have a strict defined process defined by a retail bank suddenly being used by a wealth manager or a private bank. You've got to have the data to know what that situation looks like right now and how you can react to it. And you've got to give the tools to the people who are making those decisions to try and get that new client on board, to try and onboard that client more efficiently and less intrusively and quickly, etc. So I think when we look at the use of a word, what that really implies is flexibility, adaptability, insights that are there now that can be taken to drive decision making forward. But really, there's so much information out there now, as people have mentioned on this call: LinkedIn, Companies House, news checks, PEPs and sanction checks, and there are specialist vendors that do a really good job at that. But to me, it all comes down to the ability to aggregate that data in a flexible process that allows you to adapt to the changing market conditions, your changing client demographics, and empowering those advisors to have that information to allow them to actually make the decisions quickly and to provide that emotional connection to their client.
Great. Alessandro, same question. Let me just repeat it. So the new ways and channels for wealth managers to acquire new clients, and the kind of 2 or 3 summary points that you think wealth managers should take on board to improve their use of technology to win and find clients.
So I will go back to the 3 pillars. So the first one is prospect intelligence. The more you know about the prospect, their objective, their history, their network, the better you'll be able to assess priorities, understand an approach, and be more responsive to their needs as you're conversing with them about what you can do to further the wealth. The second point is this organizational process. So monitoring where you are, understanding priorities, which RM to assign to a client, what compliance thinks of those opportunities, how management thinks you should invest in that relationship. So this intelligent pipeline management is key. And the third one, probably the most important one, is showing the personal touch to the client, understanding which marketing content to use, which sample proposals to make to the client to prove the benefit, engage with the client digitally in a seamless way, because how you engage with them during the sales phase gives them a preview of how responsive and elegant you'll be in their service, in the servicing to them when they become clients. So in a way, having good digital client-centric tools during the sales phase is key to the sales effort in itself.
Great, thank you. And Pew, finally to you. Shall I repeat the question?
Oh no, I read it. It's good.
Great. You read it, perfect.
Yeah. So as we talked about quite a lot, there's so much things in the industry about regulation, AML, KYC, and so many checks and balances, right? So, but I think our focus is really what we want to do is we focus on kind of the digital experience for clients, the emotional experience for clients. So that's our focus, right? And our digital solution just should support those 2 experience and emotions, right? All the rest should be behind the scene, and for a client, it should be not really visible when he comes just in an onboarding process, So we want them to get connected with the wealth manager. So emotions is something really, really central for me that we focus on over the next few years. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, guys, we have pretty much hit the hour, so I'd like to thank you all for your contributions. Very, very insightful. Certainly from my perspective, I've learned that there's more to this than sort of meets the eye, and there's a hell of a lot going on. As with most things in wealth management, it ties into traditional and existing cultures and technologies and practices. I think from our side, we should write a summary of this so the audience and yourselves have something to sort of consolidate views. So we will go away and do that. But Alessandro, Pugh, and Anthony, thank you for the time. Much appreciated. For the audience, we will, of course, have more of these sessions coming up. But if you want to ask any further questions, we will be happy to connect you to the three panelists and direct those questions to them for their responses. But again, thank you, and we wish you all a good rest of the day.
Thanks, Stephen, and to everyone.
Thank you, Stephen.
Bye.